functional versus class component. Okay, here is the difference between our versus functional versus class component. Okay, let's see first functional component. Okay, a functional component is just a javascript function. Okay, which accepts props as an arguments and return or react elements. Okay, it means that, okay, functional component is a plain javascript function. Okay, functional component are plain javascript function which accepts props as an argument and returns or react elements. Okay, then use functional component. Why should we use functional component? Okay, use functional component if you are writing a presentational component. Okay, if you are writing a presentation component, then use a functional component. Okay, which does not have its own state. Okay, it does not, functional component does not have its own state and doesn't need to access a lifecycle hook. Okay, a hook is a method in React. Okay, we'll learn about hooks in later. Okay, but for a difference between functional and class component, we use here this point. Okay, need to access a lifecycle hook. Okay, then a class component. A class component requires to extend from a React dot components and creates render function which return or react elements. Okay, it is the definition of class component. Okay, as you already know about class component. Okay, which needs to extend from a React component. Okay, and creates a react function which will return or react elements. Okay, these requires more code. Okay, for a class component we have to write a more code. Okay, but it also give you some benefit which we'll see in later. Okay, for a later or future benefit, we use this class component. Okay, we use class component to access our lifecycle hook, and class component have its own state. Okay, you can't use set state in a functional component. Okay, so it is known as functional still less component. Okay, because a functional component is just a plain javascript. Okay, you already know that the functional component is just a plain javascript function. Okay, that's why it is known as functional still less component. Okay, it doesn't contain that set state. Okay, so this functional component is also known as functional still less component. Okay, why we call this? Okay, so every time you see a functional component, you can be sure that, okay, the particular component doesn't have its own component or own state. Okay, state component. Okay, then if you need a state in your component, okay, you will either need to create you will either need to create a class component, or you lift the state up to the parent components. Okay, and parse it down to the functional component via props. Okay, with the help of props we can access the state component. Okay, state in your component with the help of parent component. Okay, then next topic is, why should I use functional component at all? Okay, why should I need functional component? First point, functional components are much easy to read and test. Okay, functional components are much easy to read and test because they are plain javascript function. Okay, without state or lifecycle hook. Okay, functional is you already know that. Okay, functional component doesn't have its own state and lifecycle hook, or it cannot access lifecycle hooks, so that it is easier to read and test. Okay, is the functional component are plain javascript. Okay, you end up with less code. Okay, in a functional component we have to write a less code. Okay, then next one is, they help you to use best practices. Okay, They help you to use best practices. It will get easier to separate container and presentational component because you need to think more about component state. Okay, you have to think, you need to think more about your component because we don't have to access set state in your component. Okay, we don't care about set state function in your component, so that it is it is easier or it is easier to separate container and presentational component. Okay, as we think about component state. Okay, then next one is best performance boost. Okay, as React team mentioned that there may be a performance boost for a functional component in near future in React version. Okay, near future React version. Okay, that is the best advantages of using a functional component. Okay, that it has the best performance boost. Okay, these are the advantages. So advantages of functional component. Now next is, why should I use class component at all? Okay, why should? If you need state and need to access lifecycle hook, then use the class component. Okay, this is the only one advantages over the functional component. Okay, if you need state and need to access lifecycle hook, then use the class component. I recommended you to use as soon as possible use the functional component because that has a best boost. Okay, boost performance. If you need state and need to access your lifecycle hooks, then use a class component. Okay, these are the these are the difference between functional component and class component. Okay.